First was founded in 1989 by Dean Kamen. As an inventor, he realizes that he can impact so many people with his inventions, but the way to have the biggest impact is to create a whole generation of new inventors. Through hands-on, engaging robotics challenges, FIRST ignites passion in STEM for kids ages 6 through 18. There's 4 worldwide programs where the kids dive deep into a problem and help invent a solution.
Once you get the challenge, you figure out your game plan.
You make a robot and you code on it.
When it works, I'm very happy because we worked really hard.
Throughout each of our programs, teams embrace FIRST core values.
Discovery. Innovation.
Impact.
Inclusion.
Teamwork.
Fun.
At face value, FIRST is a robot competition, but at the end of the day, it's so much more than that.
We learn a lot about leadership, how to communicate with others,
Problem solving.
Working together, helping other teams.
You have mentors that are actually in the field that can tell you, oh, this is why this works, and this is the science behind it. And you're like, oh, wow, that makes so much sense.
Our mentors teach us not just about STEM, but about life.
They always flip the question around and ask me, where would you find the answer to that question if I weren't here? They slowly built my confidence up so much more.
I think it's incredibly important for youth to see careers in science and engineering as a possibility for them.
Being in FIRST, I realized I am smart enough to do this. It doesn't matter what background you come from.
FIRST actually taught me that I'm capable of doing anything that I set my mind to.
It definitely made me look at other challenges and be like, hey, I want to try that.
I know that I can do it now.
There's nothing better than seeing your robot on the field playing for the first time. You're all there like, is it gonna work? Is it gonna work? And then when it works, it's the best feeling ever.
Even though we're competing against other teams, one thing that we really focus on is cooperation, which where every single team who we're competing against, we're also working together.
It's very competitive, but you're friends with the people that you're going against. It's like a sport, but in its own way, it's better than a sport.
I think FIRST in general really has helped me become more involved in my local community.
Back in my old elementary school, I'm trying to help their robotics program. If you start them off young, their possibilities are endless.
As a participant in the FIRST program in high school, you get access to $80 million worth of scholarships.
There are scholarships for colleges, universities, as well as technical programs.
FIRST really develops a pipeline where there's jobs, there's careers, there's opportunities for every one of these kids based on the skills and the experiences they develop in these programs.
In FIRST, every student can go pro. It's a really cool way to step into your future.
FIRST completely changed my life. It can really prepare you to solve any number of the world's big problems because they're going to teach you these applied skills around people, science, and how the two come together.
The future is technology, and I feel like robotics takes a big role, and I'm just really happy about being part of it.
I am FIRST.
Yo soy FIRST.
I am FIRST.
I am FIRST.
We'd like to welcome everybody who's with us today for our Friday, April 3rd FIN virtual conference. We've got a lot of really great content for you today. The first couple of videos that we're going to show are recorded interviews that our student board did earlier in the week. We have an interview with an IU Luddy graduate, Katie Spoon, who is at IBM Research, and while at IU Luddy had worked on an AI program to help identify young children with dyslexia. Also, we're going to hear from a member of Team Penske, James Schnabel, who is a graduate of the IUPUI Motorsports Engineering Program. And before we do that, though, well, we'd like to start today off with a video tribute to our volunteers, the folks who work hard to make our events run so smoothly, and put in countless hours of building our fields and queuing teams and just doing everything that it takes to run an FRC event. This would have been the state championship weekend. And so with that, we would like to share just a thank you from us here at First Indiana Robotics. So here we go. We're going to show you that video real quick. Little technical difficulty. I'm going to get to that video in just a second. I'm glad that never happens. Again, we're excited to be bringing all this great content to all of you today. And we're going to show you that volunteer video here. Thanks again to all of our volunteers. We miss you guys. We really appreciate all the hard work that you put into making our events so amazing. And thank you again. So moving on, we're going to next, the first thing we're going to see today is an interview from earlier in the week with IU Luddy graduate and current research engineer, Katie Spoon from IBM Research. Interviewed just a few days ago. Today's show with an interview taker on our student board of directors. I'll be interviewing Katie Spoon. She's a recent graduate of Indiana University's Luddy School of Informatics, Computing, and Engineering, one of our scholarship providers. And so to learn a little bit more about Luddy and some of the work that students get to do while they're at Luddy, Lucy is going to spend a little bit of time with Katie today. So thank you. Take it away.
Alrighty. Hi, Katie.
Hi.
Hi. So I guess we'll just go ahead and get right into it. So my first question is just to kind of figure out more about your experience at IU and Luddy. So why exactly did you choose IU School of Informatics, and how was that kind of part of your college decision process?
Yeah, so in high school, I didn't have any exposure to computer science or technology, but I was really interested in journalism. So I kind of entered the informatics program at IU, hoping to like combine it with journalism. What I liked about IU as a whole was I was not really set on that particular path. Just like a lot of people don't have any idea what they're interested in when they're coming in. But one thing that I liked about IU as a whole was that it was this huge school with lots of possibilities, lots of majors, and kind of specialties in all sorts of different things. But Luddy itself was a very small environment. So in my major, there were only 500 of us. So we had, you know, the resources of this huge school with all of these opportunities in a lot of different fields. But at the same time, like you could really sense the community, like walking around the building. You know, there were always people I knew. So.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I think that's really important to kind of get that mix of small out of big school. So that's really cool. So what key experience and takeaways from your time at college were really impactful, and academic or not, but yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that I think was really important was when I first started, I think I was freaking out about, you know, getting a job and like making sure that, you know, I was passing my classes and stuff, which is very important. But I think that, again, like the sense of community and the relationships that you build in college, I think are more important than the skills that you'll walk away with. Obviously, like you do have to pay attention in your classes. I'm not saying like, you know, you don't want to fail your classes. But at the end of the day, like getting a job, if you're working in your classes, it will happen, you know, if you're trying hard, in technology at least. But I would stress that like, you know, forming relationships with people and kind of like getting exposure to lots of different groups of people was kind of like the key takeaway for me, I think. And a lot of that did happen in like the research projects that I did, but also just student organizations and different minors that maybe weren't in technology stuff.
Okay, yeah. So it's definitely a lot about the social and relationships, which is awesome to hear. So how exactly did you get involved in that community, and kind of when did you start to form really important relationships, especially as a woman in a field that isn't really female dominant?
Yeah, so that was very largely based on a scholarship that I just, I mean, I kind of like randomly applied to a bunch of different scholarships, you know, because extra money.
Of course, apply.
Yeah, and there was actually one at IU through the Center of Excellence for Women in Technology. It was an emerging research scholars program where I knew nothing about research and nothing about technology, so I thought, you know, maybe that would be a good way to kind of like learn, I guess. So my freshman year, first semester, we were matched with faculty who were doing research projects. And kind of just blindly, I was put into a health informatics lab where they were trying to study the impact of rare diseases on people and how technology could be used to help them communicate with each other and get through their diseases. And that experience, I think, was kind of just like the beginning of getting involved in research as a woman. It was this whole program of all women, and we were all in different fields. So there was like everything from anthropology to library sciences to chemistry. And so we all had to like get up every week and present this like elevator pitch of our projects, which before that experience, actually I had like very strong presentation anxiety. So I think just getting comfortable in a group of women who are all kind of in the same boat of learning and that sort of situation, it really, I think, prepared me for being in research projects in the future, because I think as a woman, something that happens to all people in a new situation is, you know, you get kind of scared that maybe you're the only one who doesn't know things that everybody else knows. But that's just kind of research in general. And so that experience, I think, really helped kind of start to form that sense of community, and especially as a woman. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I think you kind of started to get into it, but obviously you've got really involved. I think we'll talk a little bit about it coming up here, but you got involved into really heavy duty, really awesome research programs. And how did you kind of go into it, especially not having experience in that and getting over that intimidation to grab a hold of that and get started?
Yeah, so I think the community was a big part of that, but also just, I mean, do you mean in terms of like external factors or like kind of?
Yeah, kind of like coming in as a new person into this area of study and figuring out how to get into it and get hands-on and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, so I think, I mean, that particular research project freshman year, we had a class where we would all meet every week. So they taught us like all of these skills. They taught us like, I mean, I don't know if I even knew what an academic paper was at the time. Yeah. So like they just walked us through like, okay, how's this set up? How would you do kind of a search for similar papers? If you want to learn more about a topic, like what's a good way to go about that? So I think that experience in general just gave a lot of the foundational skills in research. But I know there are besides that program, there are also tons of other things, like whether you're, you know, a woman or, you know, any person, you don't have to be like, you know, underrepresented in STEM. Mm-hmm. You can get involved in different research labs where if you're new to the team, they typically will take a lot of time to invest in you and teach you, you know, how do you look, like how do you learn new things, you know, like learn new programming languages for a specific, you know, thing you're trying to do in your project. I would say for me, I mean, research or other projects like that, whether it's with kind of in an academic setting or not, are probably the best way to get like hands-on experience besides like class projects and stuff. Because you know that you want to do something, you know, you have this, oh, like what if I tried this without exactly knowing how you're gonna do it. So you have resources and people around to help. But
that's pretty awesome to hear that they really help you through that process. Mm-hmm. So awesome.
Yeah,
so kind of to get into more specifics, you worked on and developed a dyslexia project at IU through Letty. So how and when did you get involved with it?
Okay, yeah, so I was a junior and I was part of the scholarship that I was in, the research scholarship, you had to be in a lab every semester. You could change, so I changed many times, and I landed in a computer vision lab my junior year, where I was also taking a class in computer vision while I was working in the lab, just to learn more kind of about the subject, because at the time I didn't know anything about artificial intelligence, or in the sense of computer vision. And so I was in that class and we had to do a class project. At the time in the lab, I was working on object detection, which is basically, if you imagine like a self-driving car looking at a scene, you want to put boxes around the objects in the scene. So that could be like a tree or a pedestrian or a stop sign. But the actual application was kind of missing from that project. Like it was very heavy on, you know, okay, how do we get really good at detecting objects? And I think I was missing some of the application kind of focus that I'd had in previous projects. Like, I think it's a struggle when you don't really see the impact of your work. So for my class project, I wanted to use that as a chance to kind of like branch out and do something that actually impacted people. And that's when I connected with a professor I had met in health informatics, actually. Her name is Katie Seek. And she was actually just complaining about the process she was going through at the time with the school system to try to diagnose her kid with dyslexia. And it's actually a very difficult process to get kids diagnosed with learning disabilities, which I had no idea at the time. But the school systems are under, you know, an enormous amount of stress. They don't have funding to kind of implement screening, early screening for children with learning disabilities of any kind. I mean, it's, I think 1 in 5 kids is estimated to have like some kind of language or attention-based learning disability. And the key thing is that it's intervened, I mean, early. So I was thinking, you know, she was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if, you know, you could use computer vision to like somehow detect whether a kid could potentially have, you know, one of these learning disabilities. So that's kind of how it started. It started as a class project, and, you know, we got like a small data set of her, you know, her friends that she knew, you know, and all these things. And we kind of tried some different models, neural networks. And then it just didn't go away after that. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I really love how you kind of took that course and applied something that you were really invested in. So that's super awesome. So is this project something that you have worked with since or plan to work at all on in the future?
Yeah, so that project, the class project, was my end of my junior year. I then spent my entire senior year, which was also, I was doing the accelerated master's program at IU. So my senior year doubled as my master's in computer science. And so it was my senior thesis, I guess, or master's thesis, it was actually that project. So I worked a lot on that project my senior year, and actually developing, you know, a data set that was more balanced and not biased from, actually have samples all over the country. And so let's see, we currently, since then, I've still been working on it kind of on the side while I've been at work, but we have some good kind of progress on it, but it's a very difficult, because the vast majority of that project is actually not technical. So I think that this was an important thing that I learned also, just being in a technical major, is that sometimes when you end up on application projects, I think it's really important to consider the context of the project you're working in. So this is in an education setting. So the majority of the work I was doing was, you know, talking to teachers and students and setting up data collection and learning things from parents. Like, I read a book on how to advocate for your child within the public school system and like all these education laws. So that stuff was a very time consuming, and it kind of requires being around, I guess, a group of people. So being within kind of that team setting. So it's been a little bit difficult from afar to continue that project. But we do have a pilot school system of about 1,200 kids, where the teachers have uploaded samples now for almost all of those kids. And we've been able to kind of analyze a less biased data set. I mean, obviously one school system is not representative of the whole nation, but it's better than like a random group of kids. So
For
yeah,
sure.
there's been a couple papers last year on the project, but it's still definitely in a exploration stage. But yeah, so the goal is that it would be eventually some kind of screener for kindergarten or first graders coming.
That's super cool. That's something that is going to have a huge legacy and can do a lot of good for people. So that's awesome.
Let's see.
Yeah. So you kind of were talking about different skills that you learned in working with different people, not necessarily in technical positions. So how have those experiences, especially the ones that you were talking about, applied to your work now, which is at IBM, or other projects that you worked on since?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. And I think it's a really good skill to be able to work in an interdisciplinary environment. I honestly think like what I do now, it seems so disconnected from what I did at IU with the dyslexia, and it's more of a social application. Whereas now at IBM, I work on a hardware team. So we work in artificial intelligence and deep learning. Basically, there's all these huge neural networks that run like what I talked about with computer vision. If you want to, identify a person in a scene, or if you want to use, Google Translate, any of those things take up an enormous amount of computational power. So we are actually working on a chip to accelerate those networks. My team is all hardware people. So double E backgrounds, physics, and I'm kind of like the software person. So I would say that in that job, like most of what I do is kind of just as a connector almost of, here are things happening in deep learning, which is kind of my background. And how can we bring, those new applications in as maybe a good application for the chip to run, if that makes sense. Like what are new things in deep learning that our team should be paying attention to? And I think it was the same role that I was in the dyslexia project of, just like a lot of what I was doing was, explaining and communicating with people who otherwise wouldn't have been exposed to the other side. And that's a role I really like. So I think anybody who's interested in that, especially, should explore different fields at their school, like different classes and stuff. So.
For sure. I think that makes a lot of sense. The world isn't based around just groups. People have to interact and communicate a lot with each other. So that definitely makes a lot of sense.
It definitely will open, I think, a lot more opportunities for roles that you can kind of find yourself in. Because I could be a software engineer. I enjoy this more at the moment. Maybe someday I won't, and I'll switch to software engineering. But for now, it's pretty fun.
Gives you options.
So.
Yeah. So do you remember a time, not necessarily relating to the dyslexia project or not, but that included things that were really going wrong and kind of how you worked through that process and were able to apply your problem-solving skills?
You mean in a academic setting or?
Yeah, either on stuff that you're working on now or in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that a degree in computer science is pretty much a degree in problem solving or Googling, depending on how you're explaining the word problem solving. But yeah, I would say that that's problem solving is exactly what at least STEM majors, probably all majors, should prepare you for, or at least just thinking in general. I don't know. I mean, that's pretty much, I guess, research is just research itself, and maybe computer science, I guess, is very much about perseverance. I don't know, kind of sticking with a problem until you get a solution. So that's pretty much, I would say, my entire job. So I can't think of a specific, a specific example, but I would say that's what the major kind of prepares you for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So kind of thinking back to your time at IU Luddy, are there things that program offered that were really special or that opportunities that they gave that you really were appreciative of?
Yeah, so I would say one thing that I did that I haven't talked about in Luddy was that it's actually very easy to become a TA, like a teacher's assistant, for classes. And they pay pretty well, and they're always hiring. I don't know why. I guess people, there's a high demand for TAs, I guess, compared to some of the other majors. You have to be a TA for like med school or something. So biology, kind of harder to be a TA. But within Luddy, I think that being a TA was kind of, I don't know, it's probably not special compared to other schools, I'm not sure. But I was able to be a TA starting second semester of college. So then I did that my entire time. And you can kind of like rise through, and by the end, I was a lead of a staff for one of the core classes in computer science. And I think that experience was very rewarding because a lot of the students I saw in different classes kind of like get better over time, which was nice. There were a lot of times I was the only woman on staff, so it was really cool to be able to kind of I don't know, like kind of see that community of like women kind of come through, and there were more women each year, which was nice. But yeah, I think that experience, I mean, one, it taught me the material better because you teach it over and over, you have to explain it. And then I think also it just, it was a very like fulfilling way to kind of, I don't know, like compared to other jobs, I think it was a lot more fulfilling than other things that I could have done while I was at school. So would highly recommend.
Yeah, that sounds really cool, especially because you were able to get involved with it so early.
Yeah, I think that's something that I don't know about other schools. I know some places you can't be a TA, but if you can at a school, then I would highly recommend.
Yeah, for sure. So do you have any tips or advice for easing all of these big life transitions, including from high school to college and college to the work field, for us first robotics kids?
Yeah, I don't know if this is specific to first robotics kids, but I would say in general for me, one of the biggest things, I think especially just starting work now, but I'm sure I felt this way when I was also starting college, is just like, I mean, every person is experiencing like the same thing you are. So, you know, one of the, like, it's so easy to make friends. You can literally just kind of look at someone and be like, oh, this is so hard, I miss my mom, you know, and they'll feel the same thing. And then you have a new friend. So I think just coming into it, you know, trying to be vulnerable and really trying to like, not vulnerable, but, you know, very open about maybe how you're feeling, and trying to form those communities. Like people are very welcoming, and, you know, you can get involved in a ton of things, or you can just kind of pick a few things. But whatever happens, I would say, like, coming in school, it might be rough, you know, the first semester. But I think it's okay if you say, all right, like, I'm going to focus on my classes, make sure I pass, but really trying to get into the community, because that's kind of what's going to push you through when your classes get harder and when, you know, the stress of school really starts to sink in. So
yeah, for sure. That
especially for STEM kids, it's I mean, it's very important to have, you know, those people in your classes that you work on projects with, and, you know, getting together to do homework and stuff, because it does get hard. So
I'm sure, yeah. So I think you kind of talked about some things earlier, but how did Luddy prepare you for your career and kind of what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the main things that are probably like the most applicable to, you know, the job I have now would be the research experiences. Obviously, and the teaching, which I have talked about those both. But I think it was kind of like the fact that they had so many different opportunities in general. Like I think this is all schools. If you kind of have the opportunity to be exposed to the scholarship and the teaching, or just the ability to do undergraduate research. Maybe some schools you have to search harder, or maybe I was just lucky and like happened to open the right email. But I think that it definitely shaped like my career. Like I wouldn't have gone into research if I hadn't done that first, scholarship. So I would say that they always seem to be pretty good at like communicating the opportunities to the students. But yeah.
That's awesome. Well, do you have any last thoughts or advice for high schoolers or anything? But this has been a really awesome interview.
Yes, thanks. I mean, yeah, just the same thing as before, I guess, is just, try to find your community and really focus on school, but like also have fun.
Well, thanks a lot, Lucy. Thank you for your time. Katie, thank you for your time. And we should say you're with IBM Research, and where are you currently located?
San Jose.
San Jose, which is in the San Francisco Bay area.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And
cool.
Big help.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, again, we want to thank Katie and Lucy for that great interview. Next up, we're going to be hearing from a member of Team Penske, a graduate of the IUPUI Motorsports Engineering Program. His name is James Schnabel. James, we interviewed him earlier in the week, and we're excited to be bringing that to you here just in a moment. After this interview, we will be having our panel discussion with our student board of directors, where they talk about how they miss their teams and how they've been meeting virtually for quite a while now. We're excited to have with us a member of our student board of directors, Priya from FRC 8232, the Girl Gang. Today, she's going to be interviewing James Schnabel. James is a performance engineer at Team Penske. IUPUI Motorsports Engineering Program. And so we're going to let Priya go from here. And James, thank you for your time today, and looking forward to hearing more.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we can get started then. So we're going to start with your journey in choosing your path and then where you are now. So if you could start with why you chose IUPUI / how you got into motorsports engineering.
Sure. I actually didn't originally choose IUPUI. I started college at Trine University, which is up in northern Indiana. And I only did a semester there. I was doing mechanical engineering. And I quickly realized that I wanted something a little more specific and a little more tailored to what I like, and what I really like is cars and automotive stuff. So I found the IUPUI motorsports program, and started researching it and learning about it, and I thought, this is great. So I ended up transferring middle of my freshman year, and I went to IUPUI the rest of the time, and I thought it was a great program. I did both degrees. I did motorsport engineering and mechanical engineering. So motorsport engineering in general is a specific type of mechanical engineering. A lot of it overlaps, but it focuses mostly on racing, race cars, and any component that goes into that. So there's vehicle dynamics, there's engines, suspension classes, all that sort of stuff. You can see here kind of a picture of what I'm currently working on, which is an IndyCar team. And IndyCar is one of the big series in America, along with NASCAR, that competes all over the country and in Canada as well. So that's an IndyCar right there. And that's our team. And that's a driver, Scotty McLaughlin, that was testing for us that day.
So do you have any like favorite moments or fun stories from your time at IUPUI Motorsports Engineering that you'd want to share?
Yeah, the picture before where we're in the go-kart. The go-kart team competes in Purdue Grand Prix, which is a student-led, student-based race where we build these go-karts. And in April, we get together and we practice, we qualify, and the quickest 33 carts will race in the Purdue Grand Prix. And that was definitely a highlight for me in my journey. Just like in high school, it's kind of the extracurriculars that really help you apply and get involved in stuff. And no different than high school. For me, this was the thing that really helped me apply everything that you learn in the classroom to, running what's close to a race car. So that was fun for me. So I did that all 5 years that I was in school, and I really enjoyed it. Here on the left is us in 2018 when we won the Indy 500. And on the picture on the right is an actual IndyCar steering wheel, so you can kind of see the buttons and everything that goes into it and the screens.
Is there any like specific path that you had from going from IUPUI Motorsports into Team Penske? Like how did you get that job?
That's a good question. So I think it was after sophomore year. I was always looking for internships, and I did a few locally in Indianapolis, trying to build up to that. And sophomore year, I got the opportunity to go down to Charlotte and interview for Team Penske as well as Hendrick Motorsports. And, internship position, just an entry-level engineering sort of thing. And ended up getting the offer from Penske. And so to me, that was the dream, because I really wanted to be an IndyCar. Hendrick does NASCAR, which is similar but different. So I got the opportunity through IUPUI, through the connections that the staff had there. Penske reached out to IUPUI, sort of said, hey, we're looking for somebody. IUPUI sent them, several of our resumes, and a few of us went down and interviewed. So the opportunity really came through the connection that the school had. And that's one of the best things about choosing a school that has something very particular that you're looking for, is that they know the industry, they know the people. One of our professors, worked for Penske back in the mid 2000s. So he knew people there. That on the left there is Andy Borm, and he was an engineer for Team Penske before he started teaching at IUPUI. So those kind of connections and everything were everything for me, and they helped a lot of people. I mean, pretty much everybody out of that program now is in some sort of position that they're in either IndyCar or NASCAR, working for like Ford or GM or Chrysler, Cummins, any of those sort of things. So I thought the school did a good job of placing people.
So what is it like to then work in auto racing? Like, can you give us like a day in the life of, or like, what is it like to be an IndyCar crew member?
It's busy. There's a lot going on. obviously the schedule of a race weekend is set. So you're up against the clock of, the practice session or the qualifying session is at X time. So you got to get everything done by then. So it's not like some other jobs where you can kind of push a deadline or, work towards something. It's a pretty hard, fast. You got to do everything you can before this time. And once it is time, you have to execute because everything's happening in real time, which is really probably the biggest reason I like it. It's intense. There's pressure. You got to make decisions, and for me, that's enjoyable because you can prepare all you want for it, and you work everything towards it, and then once it happens, it's like, oh, here we go. So I enjoy it a lot.
So as a performance engineer, what is your task items throughout the day that you usually have to go through, or what are you responsible for on Team Penske?
So on a typical race weekend, we'll have one engineer per driver, and that engineer's job is to kind of set up the car, make changes to it depending on what the driver wants. There's another engineer that kind of keeps track of the data system. And then for us, we have one additional engineer that works across all three cars, which is my position, which is more of a data analysis job. So the data comes off of the car. Every time that we run the car, we'll get these files that come off with all the sensors. And my job is, in addition to those other engineers, to look at that data and help make reports and show what the car is doing, potential ways to make it better, and then the head engineer makes those decisions. So it's sort of gathering that information and compiling it for those people to make their decisions. So it's sort of the entry position to that next step, which is being the person that would help set up the car.
So is that then your goal, being someone able to set up the car? Then do you know what's next, or do you have a time frame for how you want to where your career path is going to end up?
Yeah, that's the goal. I mean, that's what I'm working towards. There's not necessarily a timetable because everything changes so quickly, as we're in our current state right now. And, our first at least 4, 5, 6 races were canceled, and potentially more too. So, that cuts back on sponsorship money, that cuts back on funding in general. So that could slow even your own career growth, just because of cutting back on cars, people, etc. So you can't necessarily have a timeline, I don't think. But just trying to learn everything I can. I'm always been a student, always been trying to learn from the people ahead of me. So whenever it happens, it'll be great.
Yeah. Can you share a time when things are going really wrong, but you and your team worked through it, whether it was in IUPUI or at Team Penske?
Yeah, there's a lot. One from IUPUI. We were at the track doing the Purdue Grand Prix, and it was the day before qualifying. And we're trying to, we've got kind of our car set up. We're happy with it. Everything's pretty good. So we started doing just a practice qualifying session just to see, what we had. And we blew up a clutch during that run. And we didn't have enough spare parts of the stuff that we needed. And it became a very late night, similar to probably a lot of the teams at First Robotics have, of just coming together as a group and getting things fixed and getting things done with what you have. And that was, it turned out to be a good moment because we did end up qualifying the following day. But it was a good team bonding moment because, everybody's stressed out. Nobody knows, we don't have the right stuff to fix it. but we're getting through. And it's that overcoming that, even that small adversity, really brings people together. So I thought that was cool. Ones from Penske, there's always some races that go wrong. People crash into you, you crash into people. There's strategy that doesn't work out. There's yellow flags that come out at the wrong time. One from this past season, we had our driver Joseph Newgarden was leading, or was in a good position to win the Indianapolis road course race, which is before the Indy 500. And we came in, changed tires, and one of the mechanics just had an issue. He's done it 100 times, but just changing a tire, it went wrong, and we lost several positions, 15 or so. Went to the back of the field, and just came in from a day that we thought we had a chance to win to somewhere middle of the pack or worse. And it's just kind of it feels defeating, but it's a group effort, and everybody's going to be that person at some point, right? So nobody had any issues with it. It's just it is what it is, but it really brings the team together, that kind of bonding over failures. You learn more in your failures than you do in successes, because if everything's going right, and everything goes right a lot of the times for us, you don't necessarily learn as much. You don't appreciate it as much as those times when things go wrong, and you really have to find out how to overcome it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, on that note then, what are your favorite moments or milestones from your career / college?
I mean, it's been great so far. We've won a few championships and a few Indy 500s, which are the two big things that are our goals. We've been fortunate enough to be able to do that. Right here's this past September in Laguna Seca, which is in California, where we won the championship. And it's those kind of moments that it's a long year, it's a lot of travel, but it's those kind of moments that really make it all worth it, and make it's very beneficial for you. You feel accomplished with those kind of things, because this right here is the Indy 500. You work all month. Everybody works so hard, all 33, and there's more than 33 cars. But everybody on all those crews is working just flat out the whole month, and there's only one car that's going to win. So most of the time, you're the car that's working all that time, and you don't win. So the time that you do get to be able to win, and everything's in the right position, everything, it feels great.
Yeah. Well, is there any advice or tips that you would give to students who also want to go into motorsports engineering, or any insight having been through the program and have a job in it too?
Well, if you want to go into motorsports, I really would recommend going to one of those schools. There's IUPUI is the only one in the country, I believe, still that has a bachelor's in motorsports. UNC Charlotte has a certificate, I think, in motorsports. So one of those schools that has that specialization and has connections to the industry, I think is pretty important. Unfortunately, when I was coming out of high school, I sort of downplayed IUPUI, and I wasn't necessarily looking at it too hard. And it turned out to be a fantastic school for me, and for a lot of people that I graduated with, just because of the connections that they have. So I guess regardless if you want to go into motorsports or if you want to go into something else, going to a place that knows about that better than the other places is going to be beneficial to you.
Right. Just let me find a couple more questions. Okay. Do you have any like favorite parts of your job day to day? So like things that you particularly look forward to when you come into work every day?
Yeah, I like that every day is different to a certain extent. You're always working towards a different race. You're always working, the rules are changing, just like in robotics. Every year you have a different rule package, a different car or a different mechanism that you're trying to work on. And just keeping up with that keeps it interesting because it's always different. A particular thing that I like is when we're actually at a racetrack and going to the race weekend. Just not all the time. We have an off season, we have downtime between races sometimes. But I guess my favorite part is when we're actually at the track and we have that schedule and you're coming up and you're just working towards actually putting the car on the track and seeing how fast you can go. That's probably my favorite part, is the actual race weekend.
Yeah. Well, so then what happens during that like downtime or like off season when you guys aren't racing?
Yep. So, all the work that you're doing during the off season is really trying to optimize how efficient you can be when you're at the track. How you have more data coming off the car than you can look at, just because of how easy it is to get data now, and how much you can store. You have more data that you can look at, so you try to make it in a workflow that you can see it all quickly and see it efficiently. What do you care about? How do you want to see it? And how do we get the most information out of the computer and into our engineers' heads and our drivers, so that they can see it and they can sort of better themselves because they can visually see now on a piece of paper after the session. They've gone out and driven the car, felt what it did, and then come in and see, okay, here's what we saw. And the drivers nowadays are so in tune with data. They're closer to our age where they're doing video games or something growing up, and they're used to seeing things visually like that. And I don't know, they're just they're pretty turned on or switched on to the data world. So visualizing all that is difficult, but that's what we work on in the off season, is building up the tools to be able to see that quickly.
Well, so what are like other parts of the job that you like don't like? Like, is there times when you're like, this could be better, or you wish that you were in like a different position?
Not a different position necessarily, no. Great thing about most race teams, and our race team included, is that it runs on a very almost a skeleton crew. Like it's only, you're always a little bit short of what you need to be. So everybody has a specific job. Everybody has a particular weight that they need to pull. And it's all important, because if anybody isn't pulling that weight, then it really breaks the whole system. So I think it gives value to everybody that, whoever is working on whatever part, however small it might seem, it really is important that you do that job and do it well, because eventually it will be seen and it will matter, even when you don't feel it does. So I've never felt like I needed, a different job or anything, because every part is important to the whole. That answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, are there any like mentors or role models that like especially influenced you through your like path that you'd want to talk about?
Yeah, Chris Finch and Andy Borm from IUPUI were big for me. My current engineer that I work with, mostly Gavin Ward, is the engineer for Joseph Picard, the car that I work on primarily. They've all been very good at sharing their knowledge showing how they look at things. So they just, here's the answer, but what did they look at to get that answer? Because then you can start to think about questions that you haven't been able to ask them, and you can sort of use their same thought process and see how you can get your own answers. So Chris, Andy, and Gavin were all important to me on my path, and I'm sure there's gonna be many more, and there are many more. And just always stay open to learning and seeing what's out there.
That's good. Do you have any other like funny stories or kind of like unexpected surprises that you've encountered through your time?
Yeah, I mean, just getting to work with the guys outside of the track also, when we're on the road, we're working super hard. And then, at the end of the day, you go out to dinner, you kind of forget about it all and just relax. So there's always that aspect of it too, so there's just a lot of good bonding with the team, and that really brings you together as a team when you're at the track too. I don't have any funny stories necessarily in particular, but just, being able to relax at the end of the day also with the same people is good for, same as what you'll be doing in first when you're with your friends working on the same robot.
Any other last thoughts or comments?
No, just continue following whatever path you think is made for you. And if it doesn't seem to be working out, don't be afraid to change the path, because there's a lot of time to figure it out. And I still feel that I'm always learning something different, and my path is always kind of changing around. And don't be afraid of that too. Don't feel like you have to lock yourself into anything, and always be learning about different things.
Well, thank you for your time today. We got to know a lot.
Again, that was a recording from earlier in the week with Priya, and Priya joining us now, our student board joining us. A couple of great interviews. Lucy and Priya, thank you so much for interviewing Katie and James. Some really cool insights into their experiences at school and on to their careers, how their programs help them get ready for their careers, and to pretty interesting careers anyway.
All right. Well, today we'll be talking about how teams are kind of still meeting up. A lot of teams have kind of been taking a break during this quarantine period, but a lot of teams are still meeting up. So we'll be talking to some other team representatives here about how they're still meeting, what they're working on, how they're kind of running their operations, and also how they're kind of keeping their team culture still intact. So I'll first start with introductions. I'm Priya. I'm from our student board of directors here in First Indiana Robotics. And Sam, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself first?
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm also on the student board of directors. I'm from Team 3176, based out
of Lucy Gray.
Hi, I'm Lucy. I'm from Team 431, West Lafayette, or from West Lafayette, Westside Boiler Invasion, and I'm also on the student board of directors.
Hi, I'm Lucy Baker, and I'm from Team 3940 Cybertooth out of Kokomo, Indiana, and I am also on the student board of directors.
All right. So the first question for today will be, how are you guys organizing yourselves, and what platforms are you using to do so?
So a lot of what our team has been doing to organize ourselves over this weird time is we've been using a lot of different platforms such as Discord and Slack especially, and Google Classroom for its calendar, just to keep ourselves organized. The way we order ourselves is we use the leadership roles and mentor roles that we define throughout our season and have pushed those into these platforms and define them. Especially in Discord, we have the different roles set so that that leadership structure is still in place. And to make sure that that stays in place, we have leadership meetings every week to make sure that is all cohesive and that everybody knows what's going on.
Yeah, for us, we are pretty similar in the way that we are organized. Although we use Slack instead of Discord, they are pretty similar, but we use that and then we'll do video calls with Zoom. And we also have our sub-team leads make sure to stay in contact with the rest of the people on their sub-team. Make sure that if they're not showing up to meetings, why, like, what's their reason for not showing up to meetings, and if they need help with any project they're working on, or if they're stuck on anything, what we can do to help them.
Yeah, pretty similar. We've been using Slack for a few years, so that's our really big primary source of communication, but we've kind of just been getting into Discord, using that for a few like fun side projects. But yeah, we use Slack a ton with different like director channels and then different subgroups. So we've been using that primarily to stay in touch.
Okay, well, how often are you guys meeting, and how long are your meetings, and how do you kind of make sure everyone is in attendance, or are they mostly tutorials? How interactive are your meetings?
Well, I can start talking. We meet once. We meet on Wednesdays. We just moved it to Tuesdays upcoming, and we typically meet anywhere from half an hour to an hour, and we just catch up on what projects we've been working on, because a lot of the stuff we're working on we can do just through Slack and we don't need to video call, or it's something that we can do individually. So this meeting is catching up. What can you work on? What do you need help with? But we'll also utilize like breakout rooms sometimes on Zoom and just talk, or we'll have like an outreach only meeting after the regular meeting, and we'll talk about what we're working on, like what needs to be done, and just keeping everyone engaged.
Yeah,
Our
so
team,
go ahead, you're good.
okay. Our team typically meets, we have 3 general meetings every week, and those meetings are about 2 hours long each. And then outside of that, we have what we call mentor office hours, which are extra time for task groups to work together and work on the different projects that we've been assigning. Our team kind of functions, we've been trying to work through different technical projects that we can do online, or like different educational like lectures that our mentors or our sub-team leads have been putting together for our students, so that they can still be getting the most out of that part of the team while we have to be electronic. So they're still learning while not being in person.
Yeah, so this right now, we are actually on our spring break. So right after the announcement, we kind of decided that we needed to take a break. So we haven't really been meeting too much. We've been doing a lot of interactions through Slack and just kind of like daily check-in things. But next week, we're going to probably start meeting up a lot more and doing like 1 a week Zoom call meetings and that kind of stuff. We have been doing some extra meeting for some fun stuff on the side that we'll get into. But kind of when we had the weekend that was supposed to be St. Joseph, which was going to be our first event, we did have kind of like a big party where we had our own kind of miniature competition in our shop, and we invited another team from our area to come in, the Iron Kings. So we kind of had a mini competition, and that was kind of like it was a competition that was kind of okay, we're going to take a break, but it was kind of a big party that we kind of had for fun. So we are starting up again soon, but yeah, we've kind of just been doing more fun things since then, but I think we're going to start working on some more projects really soon.
Okay, well, speaking of those projects, what have you guys been working on that you've been checking in? What is this work that can be remotely done? Because so much of robotics meetings require in real life interactions or machine shop use or whatever it may be, or for outreach, interacting with kids. What is it that you guys are working on that can be done remotely?
So our big focuses have been, at least from the outreach perspective, putting together different outreach agendas for the coming months. Our outreach events that we have, like our big ones, are typically in May. And so a lot of those have either been postponed or canceled. And so we're trying to find ways around that so that those things can still happen with everything going on. And then from the technical side of our team, from that perspective, our different sub-teams, like our electrical, fabrication, design and programming, especially electrical and programming, have been doing a lot of workshops on our different like applications and different sensors or different programs that we use, so that they can further be learning and further have a more in-depth knowledge of what's been going on. This past week, our biggest talk was about our swerve drive system. And so we had one of our meetings just set aside to have a talk all about that, so that going forward in the coming years, the people that had designed swerve drive and were graduating or had already graduated came back and talked about what it took to do swerve drive and how advancements will need to be made for us to do that in the future. On other sub-teams, a lot of CAD work has been done and a lot of research, so that there's just more of an in-depth understanding of the things that we can do once we get back.
Definitely. What about you guys, Lucy?
What we've been doing, so I do a lot of our outreach and media, so I'm going to start with that, is that we are working on making our outreach and our workshops that we typically do and making them online. So we already have some of our curriculum published online, and it has been published for a while, so other teams can use it, but we are working on updating that so we can kind of give presentations to the community. For example, we are getting with some of the Girl Scout troops that we wanted to work with in the past and had dates tentatively set up, but now we can't meet with them, unfortunately. So we are setting up to do our outreach events online and just change our curriculum a bit, so that things that they would normally do in our shop that they can't now, they can still do at their home to get the badges. But on the other side, with our technical part of the team, we have some members on our tech have gotten access to CAD, and they are working on learning the ins and outs of CAD, but also helping others. So it's really a community, like everyone is helping everyone. And then on our programming team, people are learning different programming languages, and they are also working on revamping our website, making everything just look really nice and neat this time.
Yeah, so like I said, we've kind of been doing some more fun stuff. I think starting next week, we're gonna kind of try to assign different tasks to each subgroup, because I know it's true for our team, but we always have these really big goals that we talk about doing in the summer or in the fall, but stuff catches up and like the season gets started and none of those things usually happen. So I think we're gonna start kind of making a list of what we really want to get done now that we have all this time, and kind of try to figure out how to at least get the ball rolling for those things. Maybe do some research and just really take advantage of this time that we have. So I know, for example, I've been starting to get working on making patches for our team, so that they can have like varsity letter patches for the robotics team, so we can kind of get some more recognition and then be more involved with our school. So that's kind of just one thing, but starting to work on more kind of projects like that that are still obtainable virtually. So, but along with that, we've also started a few fun things. So what we've been doing to kind of stay in touch with everybody is do like, our mentors usually send out like a daily fun thing, like send a picture of this, or reach out to an alumni and report back, or tell us a really fun book that you just read, to kind of still have that social engagement and keep our community intact. But something really, really fun that we've started is we actually decided right before we ended that we wanted to do a D&D campaign. So we're doing Dungeons and Dragons, and it works really well because we can do it virtually. We've been using Discord and doing like voice chats and helping each other develop our characters. And we have some really experienced people who are really helpful. Like I've never done it before, but it's already been a blast, and we're just about to start our campaign. So I think this is a perfect community for stuff like that. Like we're all kind of nerdy, and yeah, it's been really fun. It's really great to still like meet up with people and be working on things that we're really into, and still kind of like challenge each other and do stuff. So it's been awesome, definitely.
Sounds great. Okay, well, so you talked about goals that your teams have. So do any of your teams have specific goals for what they want to accomplish? Because we don't know how long this like self-isolation period will last, but do your teams have certain goals for what they want to see by the end of all of this? Or maybe just even like different things that you still want to keep, even though you guys can't meet.
I know a big thing for our team is just in general, we wanted to set in place a process that really worked for if something like this were to happen again, even if it was like a snow day or just a day, that this would happen next year, let's say during build season, we wouldn't have to like stop and not meet on that day. We would still have a place where we could come and at least congregate and get updates, and maybe some sub teams could work remotely and things like that, just so that we can keep in touch later on when things like this may occur. Also, a big goal that we had, even through the off season and through build season a little bit, but can really work on and focus on in this time, was getting students to work more independently with their projects. With there being so many different all the competitions are canceled, but like there are just things that we can now focus on and put into other students' hands, making them more independent than ever before that we weren't able to do, so that our underclassmen and people that we've been training are now able to do those projects by themselves.
Absolutely. Do you have any, there's a question in the Twitch chat, but can you explain how your mentor office hours work?
Yeah. So the general team meetings that we have, so those 3 times a week are very structured. We have our announcements, we have maybe different educational lectures during those. The mentors may be there to check in, and that period of time is really for students to work on their projects with student help, and maybe like I said, maybe the mentors check in or are there to listen, but the mentor office hours are very specific to mentors are there to answer questions that we maybe had during those general meetings that we now have there. And even then, it's just a structured time period for people who don't necessarily need like that half hour at the beginning of announcements and like catching up with everyone, just so that they can work and have structured work time, with also the ability for mentors to be there and have their support from that perspective.
Okay. So are there any other kind of things that you've learned from this whole process of taking your team virtual that you think that you will implement for sure, even after all of this quarantine stuff is over?
I think I've really learned like how strong the FIRST community is, and it makes me really thankful that we're all staying so positive, and that it is hard to like not see each other face to face, but our team has, I mean, it still feels like they're there and we still chat and regularly check in on each other. So it really kind of makes me super thankful for the whole community, and just realizing that it really is all going to be okay and we're going to make it out the other side of this. So yeah.
I think a big thing that we've learned is just how important leadership communication is and cross-team communication is. Obviously, it's a lot harder to communicate and you don't have that like face-to-face interaction. So like asking if people are overloaded or if they're okay is a lot harder, because a lot of times you can see that in your face, or like when you're there and when you're talking to someone, but we don't have that. So we've definitely learned more so the important like regularly checking up on each other, especially as a leadership team, and just regularly checking up on the students, because even with the quarantine and everything, burnout from build season is still kind of a factor in things that we've been doing. So making a balance and trying to work on that together is something that we see us putting a lot more focus on in the future.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Sam on making sure, like, checking in on people and keeping that a big aspect of our team, because it's easy to go to a meeting and be like, okay, like, you seem off, like, you want to talk about it, but if, like, for us, we're only meeting once a week, and if someone's not there, it's, well, someone's not there, maybe they have homework, maybe they have something else, but especially for, like, team leadership, like, knowing to check up on someone and actively like being able to check up on someone is something that's big, because for a team that comes from a school that's pretty competitive, we've noticed that our students and sometimes our mentors get burnt out a lot, and it's something that like our team needs to focus more on and work more on, And that's definitely something we're gonna try and keep part of our team in the future.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting to kind of see how different individuals have kind of reacted to the situation, because it seems like certain people are doing really well with like using these platforms and have kind of come out of their shell and like are really active on the channels and kind of more than they would be in regular meetings person to person. And then other people who are kind of the opposite and do better meeting face to face. So it kind of does help you realize different personalities, that you can even use these tools in the season for those people that are really great doing stuff online and keeping themselves accountable. But then there's also those people that you kind of need to walk through it more with them and keep it more personable. So it's pretty nice to kind of see what works best for everybody. And I think this has been a really good time to kind of discover those things.
Well, time that we have in school, what have you guys been doing to kind of plan recruitment for next year? How are you reaching out to newer members while your team can't even meet?
So I can start talking about what we're doing. So we are planning, we just actually talked about this at our last meeting, is what we're personally going to do, because now schools are closed for the rest of the year, and typically we'll have some ads around the school, at least in May, so that people can join for our off season. But unfortunately now we can't do that. And we are looking at the possibility of making a video and sending it out to all our upcoming students, and just making sure that people know, like, hey, we're a thing, because 461 hasn't competed this year. Like, we're done outreach, but it's not as much as we were hoping to do because of this virus. So being able to have like a video that we could send out to like the people at our school, because we are a school-based team, but also getting the word out, like having like maybe like the principal or the superintendent like post about us, and just being like, hey, like they exist, like here's who to talk to, stuff like that, making sure that people know who we are, but then also making sure that our younger teams have like a smooth transition up. So like we're starting to include like some members of our FTC teams on our calls so that they can kind of start getting up to speed with what's happening in FRC right now.
Yeah, I think since we've kind of taken this break and that we're kind of giving people a little rest, I think it'll help us kind of come back stronger in the summer and in the fall to kind of hit especially that a lot harder, because that's something that we're really focusing on and really trying to get better in right now. So I think coming back and saying, hey, like we really need to establish these programs that we've kind of talked about, but that we think will be really beneficial, especially for recruitment. Like really getting an FLL team started and getting more in contact with not only the students, but with our faculty and even with their parents. So kind of like establishing more ways and trying to creatively think of ways that we can reach people in different ways and contacting different people.
I think in terms of like newer members, it's been a little difficult just because we're on our spring break right now. So our spring break is 2 weeks. So typically after like state and all that, which would have been this weekend, we would go more into focusing on our outreach. And a lot of that outreach is at public events. Like we have our Town Relay for Life. That's an event where we really publicize the team and like get younger students involved. And our first day, which is a community day, is another big day where we try to get as many families and younger students out there as possible so that they can see the team and see robotics, and the middle schoolers from our FLL team that we have at one of our middle schools, so they can get experience with the team. That's definitely a big part of like how we do that recruitment. So with not necessarily having that this year, a lot of what we've been focusing on in this weird time is training those obviously younger members, so that when it comes in next year and we have new kids but that didn't have as much exposure before, there are many more people that are knowledgeable, able to help, so that that transition is made a lot smoother, because we don't have that kind of growth period that we usually do.
Absolutely. So a question from Twitch. What percentage of your members are attending the virtual meetings, and is it optional or is it mandatory to attend? I think this would be for Lucy Good and Sam, who's are still in meeting right now.
I'm trying to think about roughly how many we have. We have slightly less than we would do in a face-to-face meeting. I know a lot of people, they just don't have time with online school because our spring break was, I think at the very start of this, at school's closing was actually when our spring break was meant to be. So now that online school is starting to kick up and we have a lot of people working, not as many people can attend. So we have still a significant part of our team, like at least like 25% attends. And we'll get like maybe 20 to 30 people on a call on like a good day if everyone's available. But it really depends on just everything, what's happening. And we did just change our meeting date with the hope of getting more people to attend and just making sure that people can come. And just because of all these constraints, we are having them optional. Normally during build season anyway, we'll meet like 6 times a week, but you have to have like maybe like a 50% attendance rate roughly in order to travel anyway. So we already had a lot of wiggle room put in place. And now, because of a lot of the stuff we're doing is individual or it's just small group based, they're not required meetings.
What about you guys, Sam?
Ours are kind of the same way. We have about 60 kids in our team, and about, like Lucy said, about 20 to 30 of them show up every meeting. Our mentor base is really, really strong, though. A lot of our mentors are returning and coming back, especially a lot of our lead mentors, and they've been really helpful through this whole process. But our meetings are optional, obviously, especially with having a lot of meetings in a week. It's a lot to ask for kids to come like 3-4 times a week, with half of us not even remembering which day of the week it is, like half the time. So it's really important that we're making sure that, especially for that burnout thing, that they're also optional, because we just want to make sure that all the students on our team, especially the people who are super dedicated all throughout build season, do get time to take a break and do get time to like de-stress and like cool off after everything that happened with and all the stress of build season and everything that's been going on. So they are optional, and the meeting attendance has been really strong, and definitely everybody that's showing up has been really productive, which I know our team is really thankful for because we do a lot.
Yeah. Another question from Twitch. Has anyone's teams decided how they're going to choose leadership for next year? And if that's going to happen virtually or if it's being postponed? Has anyone's teams discussed it yet?
Yeah, so I know that we usually do actually our leadership stuff in the fall to kind of see who's stepped up in the summer. We have a really big summer youth camp. So it's kind of, the students do a lot of the mentoring to the kids, and it's kind of like a way to step up and kind of show your leadership, since a lot of people have gone and it's more for the people who are returning. And so we have different directors, but it's very flexible and kind of changes every year depending on what our needs are and how many different leaders we have. So it's a pretty flexible thing. Like 2 years ago, I think we had 9-ish leaders, and then this year we scaled it back down because we had more people stronger in certain roles, and just it's what worked for us. So yeah, we usually do stuff in the fall.
Okay. Sam and Lucy?
We started talking about this on our last meeting, and we haven't fully come up with a plan, at least not that I'm aware of. But what we would do on a normal season is that for our 3 head leadership positions, we have president, vice president, and secretary. Those 3 people can send out emails to the team, and then the voting's all done through our back office, which is just like a team, like it's a place where our team can communicate, have schedules and everything. And they can vote. So this year we actually had a tie for president, so we have co-presidents this year, which was unusual, but it's a good thing. But we're working on that. So fortunately, our voting system for the lead people is already online, and a lot of their communication, like they are all going to be returning members. So our team kind of already has a feel for who they are and has seen their leadership. And a lot of it's going to be looking at how they act during this time, because you don't want a leader who just becomes flaky as soon as things go online. So it's just going to be different, but we haven't fully discussed about how it's going to be online, but it's already kind of set up in that way.
For our team, what we usually do is in May, our co-sponsor will send out an email and you'll have to fill out an application. It's usually either answering a bunch of like instructor response questions or a short essay about your leadership structure, what you want to see change on the team, all the things you want to see in the future. And so and then what will happen is once the applications are all in and the leaders have seen who's applied for these positions, then our co-sponsor will take some other mentors and what we call our senior SABs, so all the people from our leadership board that will be going, and you'll sit down and everybody will have an interview. And those interviews they'll conduct and they'll take notes, and then they'll have a meeting where they sit down and discuss who they want, and then they'll give them roles and all that fun stuff. And that's how our SAB is created at the end of the year, and it gets announced at our end of year party and all that fun stuff. But this year thankfully the way we do it can kind of be a pretty similar process. The only thing that'll really be different is that the interviews will be online instead of in person.
Yeah, we have a pretty similar process to what Sam was explaining, and I think it is pretty cool that we do interviews and also we ask for resumes, because our mentors thought really hard about like what would be really constructive for the team, and because I don't think a lot of students kind of get that interview practice, whereas it's kind of a low stress environment and kind of gets you more professionally prepared. So yeah, I think it's a really cool process.
Yeah. Well, another question in the Twitch chat. In all of this chaos, what has something positive been that you and your team have seen?
I think the biggest positive impact I've seen on our team is just the ability to use technical resources better. I know with a lot of everything that we do being face-to-face, though our ability with using things like Slack and Discord weren't as in-depth as probably like some other teams were, just because a lot of the communication we obviously did face-to-face because we're all there. And definitely being able to learn how to use technical resources and writing white papers and getting technical documentation out about how to use these things and getting everybody and getting finally a whole team like on a certain platform was, I think, our biggest accomplishment, just because now we just have a communal place where everybody can discuss and everybody can talk online, which is really nice.
Lucy?
I was going to say our team is kind of similar to what Sam said, is that we have been on Slack for a while, but it's kind of forcing our students to like utilize it and actually like keep talking and keep up to date. But it's also allowing kind of more like a mingling of the sub teams, because when it hits build season, tech people, you're in the shop, like programming people go find a computer, like you have something to do. But now there's less pressure on us, and like if you're normally on tech, you can like go write some grants and you can learn about that whole process. Or if you're someone who's normally on media, you can like download CAD and just learn more about that. Or you might like learn some programming, get some help. So there's a lot more like intermingling happening now between the sub teams versus what would normally happen during our build season.
Yeah, I think it's definitely give us time to sit back and relax, but also work on things that we haven't had time to focus on, along with kind of work on more team bonding with the fun projects like Dungeons and Dragons, especially because our team is pretty senior heavy this year, and it's kind of been a nice way to kind of compensate for not getting that much bonding at the end of the season. So yeah, it's been really fun to kind of do still something to commemorate and have fun. So yeah.
Well, are there any other last comments or stories that you guys want to share? No? Okay, well, I think that wraps up our session for today. Thank you to Lucy, and Sam for joining us. I think Chris is going to close us out and then we'll go into a break.
Yeah, that was a fantastic conversation. I appreciate it. I hope the other teams out there that maybe haven't been using these tools can go online. We do have some resources on our website. Also from our very first Fin Virtual Conference, some links to how to download and kind of get started with Slack and Discord, and some other virtual tools that are out there. So have fun playing some Dungeons and Dragons. And the rest of you too, yeah, and the rest of you too. I think it was really great. I loved hearing the conversation about the choosing of student leadership, and also the cross team bonding that's maybe kind of been going on, getting to know some students in different areas of the team that maybe you don't in the hectic build season phase. So I know it's tough to be a part. I think one of the things that we get a lot of feedback from our students is when we look at the student survey every year is that they feel like this is their family, and it's tough to be apart from family. And so thanks for sharing a tool to sort of bring us together. All right. Well, we're going to go on a break now till about 5:45. We've got some videos we're going to show you, kind of a mixture of some kind of cool videos from headquarters and a couple of videos produced by our own Fin Media team. So with that, we will share some videos and come back at 5:45. All right, we're back. We've got another great session with Priya and our student board on some resources for FIRST. Priya, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, again from...
I got you.
Okay. Hey everyone, I'm Priya from the Student Board of Directors here in First Indiana Robotics, and we thought that we would do a short little section on FRC resources and how to use them, especially during a time when everyone's kind of at home. We can always use this time to kind of make ourselves better and see where we can expand our knowledge more. So I'll be sharing my presentation that we made for this and kind of talking through it. Again, I'm part of the Student Board of Directors, and you'll kind of see us hosting certain sessions throughout our virtual community conference, conducting interviews and panels, and we'll be helping set up sessions on the behind the scenes as well. So if you're dropping questions in the chat, we'll make sure to answer them. All right, so the problem that I wanted to talk about today was you really want to learn something and you have no idea where to start. And in this case, we're thinking about FRC. So a couple of solutions that we've kind of gathered as part of this resource is online libraries, forums, and online tutorials. So when you want to go about improving your FIRST or FRC knowledge, you want to recognize what you would like to learn, figure out where you want to go, and then you can start searching for resources and tools to learn more. And the internet is a pretty resourceful space for doing so. And then you can utilize your resources to improve your knowledge. And this process is so important during this time when we have so many opportunities to kind of remain static and kind of give up. But I think that during this time is a really good time to improve our knowledge and kind of expand what we know. So firstly, I'll be talking about online libraries. So the first place to start is the FIRST website, and they have their own resource library. So even when starting a team or going back to a veteran team, their resource library will kind of have the skeleton items for how you get your team started and even how the program works. And the next step from kind of going from the skeleton of how you fund your team and how your team is registered in the program, I think would be the Compass Alliance. So the Compass Alliance is a really cool resource that was founded by Team 3132 Thunder Down Under. And what they've done is that they've gathered a lot of really strong teams all over the world to create really good resource packages and tag teams where you can kind of partner with another team around the world, and what they can do is kind of help you and guide you through the process of the year. And they also have a call center that is 24/7, and your team can ask any questions to them any time of day, and they'll be willing to help. And their website is really well done, so I suggest that everyone takes a look at it just to learn something new. And the FRC Penultimate Manual, Awesome FRC, and First Map are all resources that kind of detail how the program works in general, and kind of has a strategy for how FIRST is worked out and how FRC teams are kind of strategically meant to be set up. And the next two resources, the WPI library and RobotPi, are both programming libraries that can help you get started on learning how to program an FRC robot and all of those utilities. WPI library is kind of maintained by Worcester Polytechnic Institute. And what they do is kind of maintain this library, so it makes it easier and easier for teams to catch up to that learning curve on programming, especially since a lot of teams use Java. And lastly, we have the Blue Alliance, which is kind of the main resources for watching LOT, for scouting, watching match videos, and gathering any kind of data that you'd want from any history of FIRST, really. And a lot of it, the old years, the videos are still being updated from FIRST itself, but Blue Alliance is a really good way of visualizing all that data from each match to each team to blue banners to awards. And it's a really amazing resource for getting to know other teams' stats. And I suggest that if you look into Blue Alliance and are interested in that type of thing, they also have their own API docs available for anyone to see. Secondly, there's a lot of forums and virtual communities out in FRC. So the first one you would always want to go to if you have a question. Kind of a good rule of thumb is if you have a question, chances are someone's already asked it on Chief Delphi, and you can make an account or not. But Chief Delphi is kind of where a lot of really veteran members and coaches have come together and been able to answer questions in a really thorough way, and they answer in threads. So it's kind of like a community like Reddit where there's certain posts and there'll be replies to that post initially. Chief Delphi is probably the most used one among the FRC community, but there's definitely the FRC subreddit, which is more informal, but due to the nature of Reddit. And there's also the call center I mentioned above with the Compass Alliance that kind of helps any team around the world just answer questions on whatever they might need. Lastly, there's the FIRST and FRC Discord servers. So there's the big FRC Discord server, and there's also regional servers for each region and district, like Canada, Indiana, Hawaii, Israel. And there's also organizational Discord servers, such as like Women in FIRST or the LGBT community, if you want to meet different people. And there's also community servers, like the meme server, if you just want to make friends. And I think a large part of what kind of makes the community special is that everyone is really responsive with how they have their own knowledge and respond to others with on these internet communities, and they're already being used. So especially in this time, they're extremely active as we're all kind of sitting at home and learning on our own. So finally, we have online tutorials. So this is definitely not an exhaustive list. They're just mainly the ones that I think are really important for especially the technical side or even the non-technical side, but just refining a skill set at any time, this becomes really important. So for programming, the WPI library has Java and LabVIEW tutorials that can help get any team started. And I've also linked the Chief Delphi and GitHub posts for getting started on IntelliJ and vision processing. And because programming is such kind of a niche aspect that you can really learn a lot of aspects remotely, especially with simulations and such, I really suggest that this is a good time to expand your knowledge there. Secondly, with scouting, FastField, Victiscout, and Scoutomic are all resources that teams have used to really build their scouting from nothing to everything. It's a really good foundational point to use when you're gathering data at a competition. These are all really good places to start where you can really understand the basis of scouting and form your own strategy when it comes to scouting. For mechanical, there's not really a whole lot of skill sets that you can learn remotely, but I do suggest looking into calculators online and learning a lot of the deep math calculations that take place, especially calculating gear and motor calculations that can be really hard to kind of pick up right away. But that time can be taken now. And again, with mechanical, there's loads of Inventor and SolidWorks tutorials on the internet. It's all just up to you to go out and look for them. And now, just to kind of finish things off with resources, there's the main popular suppliers among FRC would probably be VexPro, AnyMark, which is headquartered here in Kokomo, Indiana, McMaster Car, CTR Electronics, and West Coast Products. And you should be able to find everything, if not absolutely anything that you might need for your first FRC robot at these 5 suppliers. Again, for rookies, the first also sends a KOP, a kit of parts, and that should also help along with how many supplies that you have throughout the year. So I have gone through a lot of different links and resources, and we're creating a resource package to link on the First Indiana Robotics website. So there's a more comprehensive list of everything that you guys or we even might find. And it's not an exhaustive list again, but you can learn so much more about FRC and the robotic skills with the help of the internet. And don't let this be intimidating, even though there is so much to learn. Doing a little bit one step at a time is so important, and we hope that you all are trying your best. And that's all I have for today. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the Twitch chat, or you can contact us at studentbod@indianafirst.org. But that's all I have for today.
So Priya, what's your go-to resource? What's the one you really enjoy finding stuff for?
I myself, a really big Chief addict. I go on there a lot. I also really like the FRC Discord community. Those are probably my 2 favorites for even just on Chief. I love learning about the technical side of things, even though I'm not usually a technical person, but the way that people answer questions can be really helpful. And on the Discord community, I just really like making friends and kind of getting to know different people all around the world even that are a part of this amazing group.
That's great. Well, thanks for showing all these great resources. And you're right, on the First Indiana Robotics website, under the Team Resources link, there's a remote resources, stuff that we've been adding, all sorts of great resources that our teams have been sharing with us during this time of the suspended season and not being able to meet in person. This is a great chance, like you said, to learn some different things. So we put a lot of those links, plus even more links that you shared with us. And we're hoping to build even more from that, from all of our programs, the FTC, FLL, FLL Junior link. So yeah, so thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Next up, we've got a mentor from FRC Team 1018, Pike Robo Devils, Peter Argo. Peter's going to be talking with us tonight about designing and making a custom circuit board. So Peter, without further ado, I'll let you go ahead and take it away.
Cool. Let me share the presentation. All right, you see that? Okay, so yeah, I want to talk about building a custom circuit board for this year's robot. Perhaps should have subtitled it, "There's only one PDP slot left, now what do we do?" Sorry. I'm sharing my screen, but I'm not. Oh, there we go. I just click on the slides. So this is kind of what I wanted to discuss tonight is what problem did we encounter? What data did we use? What design steps did we take? a little bit about the board capture and layout tool, and something about results and challenges. So we got through partway through the build season and realized that we needed a series of proximity sensors. We wanted to have a limelight vision system on board, and we wanted to use one of the Rev blinking LED drivers, or maybe more. About the time we realized we wanted all that stuff, we had 15 slots out of the 16 slots in the power distribution panel available, or taken rather. So we only had one slot available to service all of those additional loads. So let's take a look at the proximity sensor. This is a link to a data sheet for the proximity sensor. This is what it looks like. This is the wiring diagram for the sensor. This is how the sensor would get wired into the robot in the absence of this breakout board. You end up having to provide 12 volts in return to the sensor. And then you've got a signal from the sensor that goes to the RoboRio. And you also have to make a return connection to that port for the RoboRio. So this is the wiring diagram for one sensor by itself. So sort of picture 6 more of these all in parallel, and then realize that we're also going to use 6 ports over on the RoboRio. So I've got 6 different wires going straight across, 6 sensors that have to patch into one feed from the power distribution panel, 6 sensors that I have to patch to the feed in the power distribution panel, and I also have to patch the return from the RoboRio to that same point. And that's just the sensors. Like we said, we are also looking at using a limelight for vision. I had a communication with Limelight. I asked them how much current their device requires to operate. What they told me is essentially I could plan on up to 1.3 amps as long as I didn't have additional USB cameras hanging off of the Limelight. So that was kind of good news. The LED driver from Rev looked, and hopefully I'm coming through okay. It is a little more variation in how much power this driver is going to need. I ought to be okay with about 2.5 amps, maybe up to 5 amps at 12 volts. So in addition to like I said, the 6 sensors, we've got the Limelight and at least one of these devices. So all those have to be fed power. So kind of just breaking that out, the board is to break out the 12 volt service to multiple loads. From a design standpoint, we sized the board to accommodate 8 loads at a 0.5 amp each. That provides enough so that we can service 6 sensors and have 2 spares left over. Then we also designed 2 loads at 2.5 amps each for a blinking LED driver and possibly a Limelight. And we also designed in 2 loads at 5 amps each in the event that we need more current for either the LED driver or for the Limelight. To make the physical connections to the board, we wanted to use the Wiedmuller connectors for all the sensor and service wiring. These are the same sorts of connectors that are used on the voltage regulator module, the VRM, and the pneumatic control module, the PCM, on the robots. There are also some of these that are used on the power distribution panel as well. To connect power to the board, we used board-mounted Anderson power pole connectors. On 1018, we've been using a lot of the Anderson power pole connectors for all of our services. So this way, all the terminations that we do are the same hooking to this board as they are to any of the motor drives. And then the final thing here is we wanted to lay out the board so that all those external connections will be point to point. What I showed you back on the sensor page was a bunch of splices that have to be made. So we want to use the board to make all those splices. That way I can just run a wire or a pair of wires, for example, from the RoboRio to the board. I can bring the 3 wires from the proximity sensors to the board. I don't have to make any splices, just terminate wires, land wires, and away we go. In case you're not familiar with Wiedmuller connectors, you may have seen a pneumatic control module or a voltage regulator module. The Wiedmuller connectors are these connectors along the edges of those components. So one of the things we wanted to design into the board was also the ability to limit current in the event that there's a fault. So a PDP uses snap action breakers, and those are the breakers that plug into the slots on the power distribution panel. If one of the loads that breaker feeds has a short in it, so basically shorting supply to return, you'll instantaneously draw a lot of current through those wires. Well, the breaker will open up that connection and isolate that load so that you don't harm the rest of the robot. On the breakout board, we're essentially doing the same thing. We used these self-resetting fuses to provide us the same function for each service that we designed into the board. So essentially the one I've got highlighted here is a 1/2 amp fuse. It'll carry up to a 1/2 amp. At 1 amp or so, it will trip. When the fault goes away, the fuse will self-reset. So that way, if there's a short that develops in the wiring between this breakout board and the sensor, the fuse will prevent damage going back into the breakout board or even back into the robot. So there weren't a whole lot of numerical calculations to run in order to design this board, but there were a couple. One of the things we decided to do was to have a power on indicator, a green LED, and also to utilize a red LED to indicate a power fault. So this is a simple circuit showing the circuit for the green LED. Essentially the source is the battery power coming from the PDP. The return is the battery return going back to the PDP. So I've got essentially 12 volts on this side, return on this side. So it's just a matter of running some calculations. If I've got 12 volts on the battery, and one of the characteristics of the LEDs is they all have a forward voltage characteristic, and there's always a certain amount of current that you want to pass through them. So the LED is, in this case, is going to have about a 2.2 volt drop as its forward voltage. From a design standpoint, you'd like to operate the LED between, say, 15 and 20 milliamps. So basically, I can calculate the value for the resistor based on those numbers is 490 ohms. And then that 490 ohm resistor will dissipate 0.2 watts. So you do have to kind of keep an eye on the power rating of the resistor as well as the value that you use. The red LED circuit is really the same circuit. It looks different, but it really ends up being the same. In the event that I have a short across the load, then this point here is pulled to return. That is going to draw a lot of current through this fuse. The fuse will open up, so this is now gone. And what you've got left is the diode and the resistor, which is exactly the same as we had up there. So it's the same calculation. So the bottom line in the circuit board design process is we want to get the physical board back from a supplier. So I used a KiCad design tool, which is a public domain circuit board design tool, to capture the schematic, to lay out the board, and to produce the Gerber files. The design process was essentially to make sure that I've got what's called a footprint. I'll show you that for the custom parts. In this case, the V-Mueller connectors were custom parts. They didn't have a standard footprint for those, so I had to create one. Then you capture the schematic, you place all the devices, and you draw connections between the devices, you place wires. And then you transition to the circuit board design layout tool, where you actually place the components and you route the circuits. Generally, you add a few more final details and you produce the board files. Let me see if I can share. Okay. So that's the circuit board layout view. What I want to see is, and maybe Chris, give me some feedback. This is the schematic capture view. So this is where I go and I place all of the components that are to be on the board, the diodes, the resistors, the fuses. This is the symbol that I used for each of the V-Mueller connectors. And then it's just a matter of placing in all these green lines are the wires. And so you just draw the circuit that you want to be implemented, and that's essentially what the purpose of the tool is. Once you've got all of your components captured, you've got all your connections made, you export a net list from this. The net list tells the circuit board tool where all the wires are supposed to go, what all the components are, both symbolically as well as the physical footprint. Basically, all that information is needed in the next step so that you can actually pull up a circuit board. So that's what ends up coming into this. Sorry, I have to, they're good. So at this point, you're looking through the board, and it's like you literally have X-ray vision, and you're looking at all of the layers. You don't see any of the structure. To give you an idea, if I turn off the front copper, so it's a two-layer circuit board. I've got copper on the front side of the top. I've got copper on the bottom side, the back. Keep turning things off. So for the most part, sorry, keep turning things off. There's more. That's essentially the layout of the size of the board. This tells the manufacturer where they're supposed to cut for the edge of the board. On the top of the board, the first layer would be the front copper. So this is the copper that's going to be left on the board. And I guess it could be that you think of, for example, circuit board production as placing copper on the board. I view it as removing copper from the board. The boards by themselves would normally have 100% copper front and back, but I don't want 100% copper. I want selective portions of copper to be left. And so that's the front copper. Usually when you look at a board, most circuit boards have a green color on them. That green color is the solder mask. The solder mask on the board is going to go everywhere color isn't. So all these shaded holes and pads will not get solder mask. Everything else will. Let's see. The silk screen layer is real helpful when you go to build the board, because it's got designations for the components. Sometimes put guidelines. This is where the power comes into the board. So I labeled source return so that by inspection, when I wire it, I can look and verify that I've gotten it right. I like to put a name for the board, put down the team number. And a few years back, I created a logo for the team. So it seems like, well, hey, if I've got some space, I might as well do something with that space. And so I always try to put a logo on. If you remember from looking at the sensor, there were 3 wires for the sensor. And so what I've put on the silk screen layer is source, signal, return, so that when I go to land the wires at the board, I know exactly where I'm trying to put the wires. Generally, I'll put something like that as often as I can, but I can't always cover 100%. And then down here is where the wires are going to go off to the Robo-Rio for the proximity sensors. And so this is signal and return for each of those. This area in here is for the 5 amp circuits and the 2.5 amp circuits. They're really the same footprint, they're the same layout. But what I've done there is I've labeled source and return, so that again, when you're bringing the wires to the board, you've got a visual verification that you're wiring it correctly. So you combine that with the front copper, and that's kind of what the top of the board looks like. Bottom copper looks like that. And there's no screen on the bottom. So that's what the bottom of the board is. I typically use the bottom of the board for return. So everything here that's green is copper that's connected to return. So that's a little bit on the schematic capture and the board layout tool. What I get out of the board layout tool is a set of Gerber files, they're called. And I think I have to do a different share. Yeah, sorry. Okay, so this is the Gerber file viewer. Everything that I communicate to the company that's going to make the board is contained in these files. That's all they know. It's all they need to know. There's a whole bunch of different layers, and I can't really read them unless I have my glasses on. Sorry. Right now we've got the front copper and the edge of the board defined. So here's, if I toggle the front copper, there's the front copper, you can see that. And then the solder mask, let me turn the front copper off. Again, you see the solder mask and realize this is a negative. So the solder mask is going to go where the color isn't, okay? Where the color is going to end up being tin plated. And then the front silk is pretty much what we expect. Now, again, realize you're looking through the board, okay? So when we look at, if you physically look at the back of something, you turn it over. And so you've rotated it 180 degrees and you're looking at the back side. In this case, we're looking through the board and we're going to look at the back side. So let me turn those things off. So here's the back copper. And like I said, that's all the return. The back solder mask really isn't going to show up too well. Let me turn the back copper off. I don't know how well the blue on the black shows up on your screens, but again, this is a negative. And so the solder mask on the back of the board is going to be wherever those lines aren't. Let's see, the edge cuts. So there's the edge of the board, brought that back. There's no silk screen on the back, even though I could. I guess the one thing to realize is we added these 8 holes so that we had some way to mount the board. When we took it to the robot, we've got to be able to attach it to the robot. And so that's what those items are there for. Let me see, let me go back to the, right, so we're back to the PowerPoint slides. I guess, so I'm using a company called Basic PCB. I don't endorse them. I've used them before. I find them very dependable. Got caught a little bit this time on the shipping time. They take 4 days, I think it is, to produce these boards, which in the industry isn't that bad. That's called turnaround time. I can get quicker, I can get a lot quicker turnaround time, but I'm going to pay a lot more. And so we have limited funds, such as every team. So I've been using them. Another limitation that they have is they only put down what's called 1 ounce copper. The weight of the copper on the board is the 1 ounce. Typically you can get 1, 2, or 4 ounce copper on circuit boards. They only do 1. So here's what one of the boards looks like. I guess again, you can see the entire thing is colored green except for the areas that were highlighted on the mask layer of the Gerber files. We did build two circuit boards. We did one for the practice robot and one for the competition robot. Unfortunately, both boards are locked up at the school. I do have bare boards with me, and so this is a picture of the top view of the bare circuit board. Challenges. So there's always challenges in anything you do, right? So really there were 2 challenges for this project. One is the time scale, getting it done in the middle of build season and getting the parts. By far the biggest issue that I typically have are the parts. You can only build the board with parts that you have. If there's a particular part that you want to use, but nobody can sell it to you, you can't get it in time, you've got to go do something else. I didn't have any issue on the diodes, the LEDs, the resistors, the fuses, anything of that sort. But I did have a big issue on the Wiedmuller connectors. I wanted to use a smaller Wiedmuller connector, not quite as wide, wouldn't make the board as big. But all I could get was parts that had a 5.5 millimeter by 5 millimeter footprint. That did somewhat drive the board layout. It might have been about 2/3 the width as opposed to what it ended up being. But the thing I make sure that I do in all cases is I make sure that I've purchased the parts before I finalize the design. Once I press buy to the PC board house, my money's gone. And if I change my mind, I get to spend more money. So you definitely want to get that step right. So timing, yeah, that was another challenge that we had. We didn't identify the need for the board until late in build season. It was partway through February. The board capture and layout really only took a day, including the custom footprint for the Wiegmüller connector. The board manufacturer took 4 days. So yeah, that was going pretty good. And they had free shipping. Well, that's cool. But the shipping took like 5 days. So that ended up being a really big problem, a lot of stress. And next time I will do something different. I will investigate a 2-day shipping option or maybe even an overnight shipping option, depending on what needs to be done. As far as actually populating the circuit board, it took me only 1.5 hours to build the board for the practice robot. The students had much less experience building circuit boards. It took them much longer, but they did most of the build for the competition robot. As far as what this thing looks like, here's the circuit board populated, installed on the practice robot. Here you see the Anderson power pole connectors with the red-black wires feeding power to the board. We 3D printed a carrier for the circuit board that allows me to mount the board to the carrier and then mount the carrier to the frame. So the board is isolated from frame. The actual circuit board itself is kind of the dark green thing in the middle. These are the wires to the proximity sensors, the Bowel sensors. And then the white-black wires are the signal wires going off to the RoboRio. Chris, that concludes everything I had planned to present. Are there questions out there? I don't hear you. You're muted.
You probably talked about it a little bit. Sorry. What are the advantages to using a circuit board like that versus not having one at all?
I could have probably done a big rat's nest of wires in terms of splicing all the wires together, but I didn't really want to deal with that. So from one standpoint, all the splicing of wires was taken care of on the circuit board, so all I had to do was land wires. The other thing is that I have fuses for each of the services to each of the sensors and each of the devices. So if anything goes wrong on a sensor, or if it goes wrong on the line light or something, it's not going to take down everything else.
It stops at the circuit board then.
Yep.
So it's a protection, sort of.
Yes.
Wow, well, that's fantastic. So it looked like your biggest issues, time, the time of producing it from the manufacturer and shipping, 9-day turnaround total after sending it off. So I guess that kind of is sort of a leading question, is that you do this again next year. What do you do differently? I mean, besides starting earlier, are there other things that you as a team, you all learned about the process?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is sure, start earlier. The sooner you realize you need something to distribute power as a custom circuit, the better off you're going to be. I won't get caught with that shipping next year if I have to do it. It'll be a 2-day ship or a 1-day ship. I'm not gonna play the USPS where is it game.
So a team that's not been down this road before, any kind of things to look out for? Where do they get started? Is it best? I mean, I suppose kind of proof of concept, maybe do something over the summer.
Yeah, you could do that. You could these boards. I had 8 circuit boards built, the bare boards. That cost $160.
Oh, okay.
So it's not terrible. The parts to populate the boards were probably another $150. So it's not terribly expensive. But yeah, I would try something over the summer or try something in the fall. It takes a little bit of learning to solder circuit boards. So it'd be best if there's a mentor or somebody that's done electronics fabrication within reach of the team, so that they can pull somebody in and say, hey, help us on this. I don't know of online resources that could advise on KiCad or on circuit board layouts, so I don't know how I could help there. It'd be best if there's somebody that the team can pull on to say, hey, we want to learn how to do a circuit board.
Great. Well, so the PowerPoint that you had there, is that something that if you send to me, we could put on our Fin team resource website?
Absolutely will.
Yeah, and then maybe we've got a future Purdue First Forums or IU First Forums presentation.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that could be done. If there's teams that in the fall know that they want to at least be prepared to build a circuit board, I'm sure we can figure something out.
Great. Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for your time, Peter. It was really informative. It was great to see it. There, you had that picture of it on the robot. I know if you had access to the shop, probably would have been able to take quite a few, knowing you were going to do this, but really appreciate it. And maybe this summer, if we can get something going, maybe we'll all get to see it again. So
yep, hopefully we will.
Yeah. Well, thank you, sir. Have a good evening. We're going to move on to Mary Reinhardt, one of our board members here, for our final presentation of the evening, the how makers are stepping up during the COVID-19 crisis. So Mary, without further ado, take it away. Thank you.
All right. Hi, Chris, and hi, First Indiana Robotics audience. And thanks, Peter, for that great presentation. I do have a resource if anyone's interested. Tinkercad now has circuit board layouts available. You can model circuit boards on their interactive website. So if anyone's interested in visiting that, most people know Tinkercad for being able to 3D or 2D model, but that's a resource you can use for basic circuits as well. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see. Okay, so I'm really excited to share with you today a little bit about how makers are stepping up during this recent COVID-19 crisis. Most of you know that we're in a state of pandemic. That's not something new. That's why we're doing this virtual conference right now. But one of the things that has been really helpful for me, both personally and professionally, is that makers everywhere are really stepping up to this new challenge that we have. They're stepping up as people, they're stepping up as professionals to respond to this call for personal protective equipment across the United States and internationally as well, to provide our medical professionals and civilians with the equipment they need to do their jobs safely. And that's something that's really profound if you think about it. Because just of the way that we are as people. And I hope that I'm going to share a little bit. This is probably something you've seen on social media or the news recently. And so I'm going to share a little bit about what makers are doing. And I'm also going to share about how you can help if you're interested, especially if you have a 3D printer at home or you have access to a laser cutter or a sewing machine, any of those resources, or if you just are good at coordinating people. And those are all things that can help produce and coordinate personal protective equipment. It's something you can do to help with this recent pandemic. So what is Plan C? There was this really great article on Make Magazine website recently about Plan C. And I found it really inspiring because there's a lot of chatter on the internet, like there always is, about the role that not only face masks play, but homemade face masks, and what role they should play in hospitals, especially in this time of crisis. Obviously, I'm not going to go into the depths of what's been tested. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a doctor. I'm an educator by training. And so I'm not really approaching this problem from that perspective. I'm really approaching it from a what we can do as civilians perspective, from a maker perspective. So what Plan C is, it's really the civilian backup. Plan A is obviously the government produces all the face masks that we need, or has all the personal protective equipment that we need, and provides that to hospitals. Plan B is that industry steps up through the Defense Production Act and is able to manufacture additional equipment. If both of those aren't filling the necessary needs that we have, and there's still a hole, that's where we really can step in as civilians and play a critical role in providing equipment to healthcare providers, or even for ourselves, as we take a look at maybe the new requirements or recommendations for individuals to wear face masks coming up here in the coming weeks. So that's really what I'm going to approach it from, is that Plan C, civilian. So makers are stepping up in lots of different ways. They're stepping up by sewing face masks. You've probably seen online lots of different tutorials or ways that you can make your own face mask, everything from an actual sewing mask to a DIY using a bandana and hair ties. There's some that have been tested and approved by different agencies, and some that are absolutely just DIY templates. And there's pros and cons to each, but these are just different things that people are doing. There's one of the things that my company has been involved in is laser cutting face shields. That's something that's really a tier 2 need right now, is those face shields. When you're looking at a homemade face mask, a lot of different medical professionals prefer to also wear a face shield over that homemade face mask for additional protection. A face shield usually contains some sort of 3D printed headband. I wish I had mine to show you. My 3D printer in the background, the bed size is too small to print the actual face shield parts that you need, but it also has either a laser cut part, or you can also use a variety of different other materials. I've seen people use anything from transparency film to there's so much variance in what people are using and what people have had approved in different hospitals. And I've even seen where people are not 3D printing the band that goes around the face, but laser cutting it instead, or having it injection molded. Facebook is investing in some resources to have it injection molded, and in the San Francisco Bay Area, I talked to some makers that are working on that today. And that's a really great way to do it because it's a lot faster than 3D printing, obviously. And so what really astounds me is how much people are collaborating. Makers are well known for collaborating with each other, but they are sharing designs. They are doing things that really go above and beyond what we normally think of as collaboration. They're sharing things that are usually considered IP, intellectual property, and sharing it quickly, coming up with designs overnight, 3D printing things all day long on all the printers that they have, and not thinking about how they can make a profit, but rather donating everything that they have, and working with other companies who are usually the competition to make sure that the medical professionals in their community and abroad have the resources that they need to do their job safely. And that's really inspiring. So this relates to FIRST in a number of different ways, but this article I think really hits it on the head. I pulled this excerpt from an article on unionleader.com. This article talked about how Dean Kamen's company was fighting the coronavirus on a lot of different fronts. His company was actually manufacturing some things. I don't remember if it was ventilators or purified water for different countries, third world countries, I believe. You can find all the details in the article, but what I found really inspiring is that he talked about how the first season was canceled. He's well known for being the founder of First, in addition to owning multiple companies. And he mentioned that First kids, they're not sitting around moping. Obviously the season was canceled. Everyone's disappointed. But First kids are doing great things, and that he would expect nothing less from them. Teams are emailing them. Instead of using their robot to play the competition this year, they're taking it apart and testing out how they can build a ventilator. And they're also, so they see that need of ventilators. That's another tier of needs. A lot of makers are testing out ventilator designs as well. That's obviously a medical need that we have at this time. And so their students are creating designs for ventilators. They're testing ventilator designs. Obviously, these aren't being produced by medical professionals. They're students. But what a great backup to have as a plan C. That's so inspiring to me that students, when their season was canceled, our season's canceled, or suspended, I should say suspended, that we're using that time to not mope, but to create resources for our medical professionals and to really to join together to fight this pandemic. That's really inspiring to me. And to me, that's what First is ultimately about. It's about creating solutions for problems. And one of the things he talked about in the article was about how every team could join together to create ventilators if they had a design. And I thought, what an ingenious thing that we could be part of the solution together. And that's really one of the powerful things about being part of First and being part of this great organization. So if you feel called to help create personal protective equipment, there's a couple areas of local need here in Indiana. Obviously across the world and across the United States, especially in New York, they have really urgent needs. But here in Indiana, there's really, there's great needs as well. Community hospital is accepting homemade masks, face shields, hand sanitizer, N95 masks, any of those different medical supplies. They have a full list on their website. IU Health is as well. In fact, I was talking to someone from Riley Hospital today about some of the different needs that they have. And so they're taking donations of all of those different supplies. And so if you're a maker, if you have a 3D printer, if you like to sew, if you feel called to do any of those things, this is a way that you can help impact your community. And if you have a family member that's a nurse or a doctor or is in the medical field at all, or a family member that's gotten ill recently, you know the direct impact that this could have. And so that's something that you can do to help your community right now. Some resources. So obviously there's a lot of different things that you can connect to online. On our website on firstmakerspace.com, we had a recent blog post about how makers are stepping up as well. And so that's a resource. You can always connect with us online on various different platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, on our website at firstmakerspace.com. There's a couple of other really great articles as well that I want to reference. Make Magazine had this Plan C article that is a really great read and was really inspiring to me. And I think that anyone, whether you're 6 or 61, would really enjoy reading it. And so it's about all the different things that people are doing to help step up during this time of crisis. If you feel called to actually create face shields, specifically 3D printing, a lot of students I know have 3D printers at home. This is a face shield that was designed by Prusa. And so this is one of many different designs, but one of the nice things about this design is it's well known, it's open source. And you can download the design files. It has an assembly manual. It has lots of different resources that go with it. It's probably one of the most well-known face shields that's out there right now. And so this is one resource that's available to you that I wanted to point out, especially if you see the orange. Let's see. I also wanted to share the Emergency Design Collective. So this is happening in the San Francisco Bay Area. You'll notice the logo from the first slide of the presentation. What I really like about this initiative is that they're helping local makers they're organizing local maker initiatives in California. But they also have a lot of how-to guides on their website that I think would be really useful for anyone, including us in Indiana. So how to sew an effective homemade mask, preparing for an ER visit, design challenges, about addressing the critical shortage of PPE, blood donation, the testing process. And so if you're interested in testing, or different things like that, if you're really interested in those different pieces, that's something that would interest you. And I've seen some really great studies on, how much, bacteria do different materials prevent from spreading, things like that. And so there's some really good resources on this website. Obviously, there's a lot more out there, but if I could pick three, these are the three that I would share with you. The New York Times also put a how to make a face mask tutorial out recently on their website. And so that's a good resource as well. And I would just encourage anyone who's interested in helping this effort to help in any way that they can. I don't think that you always have to crank up your 3D printer if you're to be interested in helping. I know that my family was recently sick, and so I don't really feel comfortable making anything for medical professionals because there's been illness in my family. But what I do feel comfortable doing is helping to administer support, and so connecting fellow makers together. I know my team has been working with the mayor's office to come up with a design that's approved so we can mass produce face shields, because that's something we want to make sure that they're going to be accepted at community if we're going to make hundreds of them. And so there's a lot of talent needed in administration, making phone calls, those kinds of things. And so if you're someone who is good at that, that's a talent that we need too. So it's not always just about making things, but it's about gathering people together, donating money. There's a lot of ways that you can help, no matter what your talents are in this effort. And sometimes just advocating and sharing it on your page is a way to help as well. And so that's all I had to share. So I'll turn it back over to Chris if anyone had any questions.
Mary, thank you so much. Yeah, so you really kind of covered a lot there. The kind of the at-home person, maybe without the 3D printer, what's probably the best place for them to start?
So, if you don't have a 3D printer at home, which is probably most people, especially the average student, I would say that, the best place you can start is to really just be an advocate for this, to share on social media, and to encourage the sharing of good information as well. Another thing you can do is to make face masks, especially if you have a sewing machine. And so a lot of people have sewing machines and they don't know they do. They may be sitting in the corner, in the closet. They might need to be dusted off or just cleaned off. But that's something that, especially, that may be a way to connect back with your mom or another person in the house that knows that skill. That may be, that's the family consumer sciences skills coming out. So that's a great way to connect some of those skills and to make some of those face masks. There's some way there you can also hand sew masks. especially if you're using it for yourself. I know the CDC is considering guidance on not requiring, but recommending Americans to wear masks out in public. And so if you're interested in just making a mask for yourself, just to test it out and see, you don't have to have any fancy materials. You can use a vacuum cleaner bag or an old shirt. And so there's a variety of materials that you can use, and any of our students who are interested in looking at different materials and how effective they are, there's lots of research available that you can take a look at. That's what I would recommend to somebody who wants to get started, to just make your own masks, make them for your family. If you have any extra masks, you could donate those to maybe to people to your neighbors. And if you want to make an assembly line and create some for your local hospital, I think that's a great effort as well.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I suppose probably try to find your local hospital's website.
Yeah.
And most likely they probably are putting out on the front end, I'm sure, on their website, if they are not taking collections. I've heard of some local hospitals here that have collections for safety glasses, goggles, things like that, just kind of outside. I'm sure they're taking them in and sanitizing them before using them. But if you can clean off some of that stuff, I'm sure beforehand. So I suppose definitely work. The last thing you want to do is take a bunch of stuff to a facility that can't use them.
True.
And then they have to deal with the extra burden of disposal or passing them on. So always trying to make that connection first. I know we've got some first teams out there that are doing quite a bit. And it looks like they're, it's because they've got students that have 3D printers at home or mentors that do. And so they're kind of working remotely together to work on that. So thank you for this information. And I suppose too, as this someday is going to wind down, where we'll start to be able to go back out, and the number of cases, we hope, right, will be on the downward trend. But my feeling is that the hospitals and medical facilities will have a need for this even for a while after that.
I would agree with that, Chris. I think that the need is only going to get greater. And especially in rural areas, they're often the last to get this personal protective equipment. And they're the last in line to be able to order equipment. I know that some areas are banding together where you have large purchasing power, like community hospitals or IU Health. They have the purchasing power to be able to secure their own N95 masks from China, for example. There's some efforts being made to do that, but small rural hospitals are just not able to do that. And so if you're in an area where, a small area like most of our state is, it's rural. They're gonna have the greatest need. And so even IU Health and Community are taking homemade masks right now and face shields. Wow. And so that's something that's signals to me that there is a great need across all hospitals. And that nothing that I think there are ways to sterilize this with different types of gases and things like that. Obviously, you want to make sure that, if you're sick, you don't want to be making personal protective equipment for others. And you want to treat it, but you want to make sure that you're wearing gloves and things like that. But consider if you're in a rural area, there may be a great need. And I think anything that you can donate would go a really long way. Yeah. Sometimes there's just one doctor in those areas. So anything that you can donate would help them to protect themselves.
Well, very good. Well, thank you so much. It's a great presentation. Some really good things. I shared, I was typing feverishly as you were putting those links up. I put a lot of them on our chat.
Oh, okay.
And then I'll also get those onto our resources page on our website, so that if teams are looking at, how could we do some things? Well, there will be some links on our new remote resources page showing them the how to sew a face mask or things like that. So, well, thank you very much.
To you, Chris, too. And I think that that's, there's a great tutorial, to get started on how to sew a face mask right on this Emergency Design Collective That's the one I would point to. If anyone's, looking for a design today, this is the one I would go to. It's an easy one. There's also other ones out there. And so, but I'd be happy to send it to you so you can just copy those.
Well, that looks like a fun family project, something that you might not be able to go gather friends or go other places, but the folks that you're currently hunkering down with be something just fun to do together.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, 6 feet apart, one person on one end of the table, one person at the other end.
Yeah, family's always together anyway. So
right. Yeah, but no, those could be some fun, just different activities. I know a lot of people have been playing a lot of board games and going on walks and all that stuff's so good and getting outside. But yeah, something that a little bit of giving back. So yeah, we'll get those resources on there, and you could even, I'm sure, some of the teams that they talked earlier about how some of them are meeting virtually, that could even be something that they're meeting virtually and talking and stuff, but also making a mask while they're sitting at their table, and they're sort of doing it together. They're just around a table on the internet, right? So
absolutely,
yeah, there's all sorts of different ways. Yeah, so it's people are gathering for coffee virtually now, and everything. So, well, thank you so much. We appreciate it as always. And we'll wrap up for tonight. We do want to make sure that everybody, there's an email that went out and some social media that went out just a little while ago. On Monday evening from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern time, we will be introducing you to our 3 first Tech Challenge Dean's List finalists, and then we'll be announcing the 8 FRC, First Robotics Competition State Championship Dean's List semifinalists. So we're very excited about that. That'll be Monday, April 6th. That's just a few days away, from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. It'll be going live here on our Twitch channel, and we'll look forward to seeing all of you then. All right. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic weekend, everyone.